It is with great ambivalence that I stand here. And as Sieber knows, I never know whether I'm grateful to her for having introduced neurofeedback or whether I curse her for it. It's a weird field. It's a field with very brilliant people, many of whom don't think like psychologists. They're brilliant engineers and game designers. Very few of them feel a need to actually document their results. And so when I started to do neurofeedback research, I've gone to the National Institute of Health 6 times, and the overwhelming response every time is, there's nothing new about this field. People have been doing this for 30 years. There just isn't any good research that really backs it up. And I said, well, thank you very much for getting me into this, to be seen by my colleagues as a field that has failed to keep up with scientific standards. So it has been not easy. But I got into this. I've been interested in states of mind and EEGs for a long time. As a medical student, I worked in the EEG laboratory, about the size of this room, filters, instruments, and today in my tiny little office, I have more good equipment in a tiny little office than we had 40 years ago in a gigantic thing. So that's just great. Also, very early in my career, it became clear that traumatized people had major EEG abnormalities, and so I sent my first 100 patients to EEG laboratories, and the results were always the same. Non-specific EEG abnormalities centered around the right temporal lobe. So after the first 100 EEGs, I thought, I'm not learning anything from this because we don't know what to do with any of them. Then my group actually did the first neuroimaging study of dissociative identity disorder, and the first EEGs happened to be around the same time that my friend Frank Putnam did it at NIMH. We're still sort of battling with each other who was the first one. And Marty Teicher was also beginning to look at EEG abnormalities in traumatized people and saw that there was a real lack of differentiation of the left hemisphere. So we're beginning to start doing some research on EEG abnormalities. Of course, as you know, very quickly our paradigm was overtaken by our love for chemicals. And so for the next 40 years, an enormous amount of money flowed into the field to give drugs to people. I did the first studies on Prozac for PTSD, first study on Zoloft for PTSD, first study on Clozaril for schizophrenia, and I can tell you that it's a lot more lucrative and enjoyable research than doing neurofeedback, because people actually pay you to do the research, which makes it possible for you to pay the mortgage, which is always a nice thing to do. And so I had really sort of lost hope that the EEG would do much for us until about 15 years ago. My friend Sandy McFarland, who will be here tomorrow, showed me a piece of work that he had done with Richard Clark, who, to my knowledge, I've never met before, who I now see in front of me. And that particular piece of research shook me up, because it showed a dimension of trauma that I thought was fantastically important and needed to be addressed. And so they did studies of ERPs in PTSD, just oddball paradigm, how the brain responds to odd stimuli. And what Richard and Sandy showed was that if you give stimulus to a group of 38 normal Australians, the different parts of the brain are talking to each other and form a coherent waveform. If you throw the same stimulus to traumatized people, there is no coherence. And in particular, what is alarming and very much fitting with clinical reality is that non-traumatized people first generate an N200, a filtering wave of the brain that tells you don't pay attention to anything else, and followed by a P300, which is really the learning wave of the brain. And what they found in these traumatized Australians is that the different parts of the brain were not really talking to each other. Richard can correct me if I'm wrong, and that there is no N200. The N200 is the filtering wave that helps you to filter out what is relevant from what's irrelevant. Makes perfect sense clinically also, because traumatized people keep being overwhelmed by stimuli where the rest of us can forget about it. It's not important. So they really have a hard time filtering out issues, and it would be very justifiable to label PTSD as a filtering disorder, of your brain not being able to really tell you what's relevant and what's irrelevant. So this filtering piece is large. I hope Mirjana and other people will talk about the filtering system, because at this point I'm not aware that anybody really knows how to predictably change the filtering systems in the brain so that people have an easier time telling what's relevant from what's irrelevant, which is at the core of being a traumatized person. The second thing that came up was very important also, is a lack of a good, robust P300. As you know, probably P300 is the learning wave of the brain. And this again made sense from a clinical point of view, because dealing with traumatized people and having dealt with traumatized people for about 40 years now, one of the striking things about them, as was already pointed out by Pierre Genet back in 1889, is that traumatized people have a hell of a time learning from experience. In fact, what Genet says in 1889 is their evolution of their life is fixed. They cannot evolve anymore by the accumulation of new experiences, because they have a fundamental impairment of learning. That's not part of the DSM, that's certainly part of what we see in clinical reality. And so the great challenge of helping people overcome trauma is, how can you change the brain so they can once again take in new information, process it, and take it seriously. And so a typical story of a traumatized person might be of a woman who grew up in an alcoholic family. She has had nothing but alcoholic boyfriends, and she comes into the office and says, I just met this new guy, he's wonderful. And you say, oh, that's so great, I'm so happy for you. And yeah, he's a little bit of a drinking problem, but I'm sure that this time it's going to be okay, because I love him a lot and I can really fix him up this time. I said, haven't we heard this before for the last 30 years? And so what is it about their brains that makes it impossible for them to say, no, I can't do this. I feel attracted to people like this, but this always spells disaster. So what is it about their brains that gets in the way? And so this really intrigued me and depressed me enormously, and I let it be. And then people used to come up to me. I have to say a few other things. There's another issue about PTSD that's important that they talked about for the last few days, and that is that all of our science is basically based on politics. We are political animals. Everything we do is political. Politics invades everything. And of course, the US, up to this point, I'm going to be curious what happens in the next 4 years, is by far the most dominant culture in the world. And Australia has been very kind in following the US's almost all of its ventures. And so what the US likes to do, we are a next exporter of trauma. We do a lot of trauma around the world. We have been killing people everywhere since 1848, and we are worthy successors of the British Empire in that regard. If you keep sending young men overseas, The damage comes back at home. That means you have a lot of very damaged young guys, and because they have been defending freedom and being patriots, the money for that treatment goes into the treatment of these young men who have been killing overseas. And so PTSD has basically been defined by the American Veterans Administration, and that has had certain consequences about treatment, attention, definitions, etc., that determines how all of us, including Australians, see the world. And so the funding is in the military. Sandy McFarlane works in the military in Australia. He's very well funded, unlike the rest of us. And so that's where the money is. Ruth Lanny is right now is funded by the Canadian Armed Forces, and she found some money. I'm very happy for her. But of course, the real area of trauma is in the area of child abuse. For every soldier who gets traumatized, there's 30 kids who get beaten, neglected, and molested at home. And they're basically in most of our cultures, maybe in Australia, maybe different, there is no money and almost no interest in dealing with that issue, finding a solution for the issue, etc. And in fact, by and large, there's an enormous amount of denial of the impact of childhood trauma. And here's a good example of the textbook that I read when I was a young psychiatrist sitting for my boards in neurology. It says incest is extremely rare in the United States, occurs in 1 out of 1.1 million women. At that time there were 200 million people in America, 100 million women, 1.1%, 110 women. I thought, that's interesting, 47 of them have come to my office at the Mass Mental Health Center. I must be some sort of strange incest magnet or something. And then my main textbook goes on and says, it doesn't cause so much damage, satisfies instinctual drives, mutual alliance with an omnipotent adult, offers an opportunity to test the reality of infantile fantasy, gratifying and pleasurable, diminishes subject chance of psychosis, vast majority were none the worse for the experience. That's my textbook of psychiatry, out of which I took my boards, and I passed my boards, which is sort of weird because, well, how can you pass your boards when everything you're told is a bunch of lies? Of course, today our textbooks are filled with similar, completely nonsensical statements. And I like to tell people, never believe what anybody tells you, including what I tell you. What has emerged in the field of trauma is that we started off with looking at trauma. We started to look at specific incidents that happened to people. And gradually, over the past few years, particularly because of the impact of attachment researchers like Karen Lyons-Ruth and Frank Putnam and Beatrice Beebe, and to some degree Frank Putnam in our own center, it has become increasingly clear that people get traumatized in the context of attachment relationships. And that the issue of trauma is not so much the event that occurs to you, but the context in which stuff happens to you. And for example, I was telling the other group the other day, is that in my studies I was oftentimes told by NIMH, you really have to get a comparison group of kids who have been traumatized who grew up in safe situations. And I would say that seems like a very reasonable requirement, and I couldn't find traumatized kids who had grown up in safe situations until I realized that a friend of mine was running the Shriners Burns Institute for burn children. And I went to Fred Stoddard and said, you have the population I'm looking for, you see burn children who have lovely parents. And Fred Stoddard started laughing at me. He said, Bessel, you're kidding. What kids get burned? What are kids who are most likely to have hot water spilled over them? They're usually kids of parents who are too drunk, too depressed, too preoccupied, too traumatized, too dissociated to actually take care of their kids. No, the role of parents, by and large, is to make sure that their kids don't get hurt. And most healthy people make sure that it happens. And so the issue of childhood trauma and the attachment relationship comes very close together. And that gets us into the essence of neurofeedback, because that whole attachment relationship is a feedback relationship. So I'm a member of a Shakespearean acting ensemble in some ways. And one of my fellow students recently had a baby by the name of Lennox, of all things, because her program is at Lennox. And here she sent us this picture of her and her little 3-month-old baby Lennox.
Hi. 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 Hello.
So we are rhythmical feedback systems for each other. This is what we have brains for. That's the main reason we have brains, is for me to give talks to you and later on to sit down and have you give talks to me and to interact with each other and to nod and to frown and to give each other continuous feedback, because we're profoundly social animals and almost all issues having to do with trauma has to do with the breakdown of the rhythmical system. And particularly childhood trauma has to do with somebody hurts you and you start crying and this person says, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. You plead with the person to stop doing something and their face goes blank. It's a breakdown of the rhythmical interactive systems between two bodies. And why is this important? Because that's what our brains is all about. And one of the advances of science that has occurred in the past few years, and we just had a keynote talk at the Royal College of Psychiatry about this in London. The audience was not overwhelmed with that presentation, but that's a different story, about how the interactive nature of the human brain. And these interactions which you just saw here set up schemes in the brain, maps in the brain of this is who I am, this is what I can expect, this is the world looks like, this is how the world responds to me, and all these different parts of the brain are actually become slowly hardwired, having to do with knowing what to expect, knowing who you are, knowing what your responses are, and knowing how you respond to these things. And it has increasingly emerged that in the area of neuroscience, that the areas of the brain that get damaged in particular psychiatric conditions, what Marty Tacher recently calculated in a very well received article in the Journal of Child Psychiatry and Psychology, is that it looks like every single biological abnormality that has been found up to now can be reduced to an abnormality that if you take out the issue of child abuse and neglect, they all become meaningless. So they all at the end are abnormalities that probably are more related to the nature of the attachment system than anything else. And so by now we know something about the structures in the brain that get affected by trauma at different stages of development. And so if you don't get seen, if you don't get known, and you have various forms of trauma, it affects particular structures of the brain having to do with self-regulation, having to do with knowing yourself and to know other people. So this is the latest work from my friend Marty, who uses tensor neuroimaging. And for example, what he shows is that the anterior cingulate, which is the main organ that has to do with filtering out what is relevant and what is relevant, is functioning very well in people without childhood trauma and is grossly impaired with people with childhood trauma. The precuneus part of your brain back here, that has to do with worrying about yourself, be concerned about your safety, concerned with the future, and you have no early childhood trauma, dissociative attachment, that area is pretty quiet and doesn't fire a lot and sits still. If you have a lot of maltreatment, that worry circuit in the brain keeps firing, like, what are people going to do to me, how are they going to hurt me? What has been fascinating for me since I've been going to neurofeedback meetings is that in the neurofeedback field, people know nothing about the subject. They know nothing about childhood trauma. They use words like, oh, these kids have reactive attachment disorder. And they apparently haven't read any of the work that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network and other people have done about the pervasive impact of childhood trauma on a whole variety of conditions. Another part of the brain very affected by childhood trauma is the visceral system, one's sense of oneself, what's going on with one's body, the insula sort of monitors what your body needs, what's going on with you, and that is very disturbed in traumatized people whose bodies really sort of are out of sync with their mental functioning. So here's a sort of summary of what we now know about the impact of childhood trauma is on various parts of the brain. First of all, the ventral prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that is very involved in knowing yourself, knowing what goes on inside of yourself. The orbital prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that notices that you would like to do something, but if you do it, it probably has bad consequences. So it's a part of your brain that has to do with impulsivity and the inhibition of impulsivity, of course, a very important reason why people might come to neurofeedback treatment. The amygdala, everybody knows about it by now, the smoke detector of the brain that tells you what is dangerous and what is safe. At the core of PTSD is a hyperactive or hypoactive alarm system, so that things that don't bother anybody else freak you out and vice versa. And just, I don't think it's been published yet, but Ruth Laney has just finished a piece of research that was accepted for publication that shows that indeed with fMRI neurofeedback, you can directly change the state of arousal of the amygdala. You can go there, which raises interesting questions about the form of neurofeedback we should be doing, which I'll ask you some questions about because I am completely at a loss about it. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that allows you to know yourself over time. When you're traumatized, you feel something, this feels like this will last forever. Everybody in this room knows what it feels like when your heart is broken and you have a terrible, painful event. You feel like, oh my God, I'll never get over this, my life will never be the same again. And that's because the timekeeper of your brain shuts down and you're just trapped in your misery. But the moment that your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex opens up, you can see yourself over time and know that this is just a temporary state of being. Precuneus I've talked about already, and the anterior cingulate. So these are all areas that get damaged by early childhood trauma. What we also begin to learn is that different forms of trauma at different ages have a different impact. So this is all getting quite well spelled out. And all of this is probably, of course, tremendously relevant for neurofeedback because these are the areas that we need to learn to target to change. And why is neurofeedback so critically important, although I wish I'd never learned about it. Try to get funding to do neurofeedback research, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Because right now what we use is drugs. And drugs invade every part of the brain. They're like sledgehammers, and they are unable to target any particular thing. And certainly in the US, we have a drug epidemic. People talk about a drug epidemic of street drugs, which is good to target those bad guys out there in the street. But even more damaging is the street epidemic, drug epidemic in hospitals. Last year, our kids in America got $18.1 billion worth of antipsychotic agents, and that is a natural disaster because the these drugs that we give to kids right now indeed calm them down. They block the dopamine system, and the dopamine system is the main system that not only calms people down and makes them into zombies, but the dopamine system is also necessary for motivation and engagement. And if you give people drugs that interfere with motivation and engagement, you pretty much can be sure that people you give that to will never become contributing members of society. So this is a gigantic public health issue that is barely talked about. Yeah, I'm just going to tell you a few other things about what we know these days. So I happen to have done the first neuroimaging study of what happens with people who are having a flashback. So we put 8 people into a PET scanner, we did a script of their traumatic incident, and had people have a flashback. And what we noticed here is that as people are reliving their trauma, front of the brain, back of the brain, left of the right of the brain, the big imprint is in the right temporal lobe. That's a finding that came up over and over again. So your right limbic system runs the show while you're in the middle of your trauma. And I think many of my colleagues who do neurofeedback do target P4, T4, the right temporal lobe area, and quiet it down, because that's so much a driver of PTSD type states, as based on our research back in the early 90s. What we also saw is that the left part of the brain is largely deactivated, a very interesting issue, in terms of development of psychology, and that we particularly found is that the area of the brain that is most deactivated when people are in the middle of their trauma is Broca's area number 47, which is the speech center of the brain, and that means that once again Shakespeare was right and antedated all of us when he writes about terrifying events in his plays. He says they became dumbfounded, or they became struck with speechless terror. So the people, at the essence, when they go into their trauma, cannot talk about it and cannot put it into words. For me, this really put me on this path of finding treatments that could bypass language, but at the same time that we do this finding, which has been replicated many times, the field of psychology becomes a verbal therapy, but mainly where people are told to just tell me the story of their trauma. From my mind, that is a complete misunderstanding about what trauma is all about, because trauma is an overwhelming experience that actually interferes with the capacity to form a narrative. And before you're able to form a narrative, you need to quiet the brain down well enough so the terror doesn't run the show and Broca's area actually gets activated. So it's a curious phenomenon. This has been replicated in MEG scans and other things. Finally, there's other very important piece of research that Sieben also quotes in a book from our mutual friend Ruth Lanius, and that is that Ruth decided to study the default state of the brain, but the state that your brain is in when you're just sitting in front of a traffic light, doing nothing, when you're sitting in a doctor's office ready to be called in or something, where your brain is idling. And when she put 16 normal Canadians in a scanner and looks at the idling brain, what you see is that the areas having to do with your self-experience start lighting up. The orbital prefrontal cortex, cingulate cortex, medial prefrontal cortex, and these frontal areas that allow you to say, this is what I like, this is what's important to me, this is where I want to go on vacation, this is who I like, all that stuff that has to do with the conscious experience of values and preferences for yourself. This is where you live. And what also lights up is the back of your brain, very large, This is where my body is, this is where my body feels, temporal cortex, insula, thalamus actually, posterior cingulate, all having to do with your body awareness of this is what my body wants, this is what my body needs, etc., etc. Then she puts 18 very traumatized people in the scanner and say, just lie there and relax. And what she finds, there is nothing there. And Sandy McFarlane has been saying this for years, is that when you're traumatized, there is nobody home. Being traumatized means living in a room, and maybe sometimes a noisy room, and the lights are turned off. That's a very important issue, is that there is nothing here. What's also interesting, as you'll see in our research data of this particular population, as we train the back of the brain, what comes online is all the areas of psychological functioning that are associated with frontal lobe functioning. And so somehow, by training the arousal in the back of the brain, you get the frontal lobe to come online. So if you drain the basement, somehow the top of the brain can start functioning. It's a discussion, because I know Mariana sometimes treats the frontal lobe of the kids that you work with. Everybody who I work with always says, don't you even think about touching the frontal lobe, and it would be interesting to have a discussion about it, because we don't touch the frontal lobe in the very traumatized kids that we see, again on the basis of our quantitative EEGs, because the back of the brain is so messed up that we just feel we need to just calm that back of the brain down, and then automatically we seem to get more frontal activity. But I'd love to have a discussion about it, because we have a lot to learn about it. Could skip all of this. Oh, yeah, let me just say something about this, just for a second. About 15 years ago, I helped to start a National Child Traumatic Stress Network in the US, with the help of our beloved Senator Ted Kennedy, whose successor is our beloved Senator Elizabeth Warren, one of the few sane people left in the US of A. They are our senators, which we're part of. And so with the help of Kennedy's office, we go to see him, and we say, you know, there's millions of traumatized kids in America. Nobody is talking about them, nobody is teaching about them, nobody is learning about them, there is no research on it, and we need to set up a discipline of child traumatic stress. And thanks to Kennedy and some other people, Senator Harkin and stuff, we set up this very gigantic network of clinics and universities around the US to study childhood trauma that is hopefully having some impact now. And when we look at the sort of trauma that kids experience, we come up with something that goes against the grain of the American spirit. I don't know how it is in Australia, but in the US, we blame everything that goes wrong in America on people who are brown, or people who have funny headscarves, or talk funny or something, because real Americans are always beautiful people who never do any harm. And so we test that hypothesis. And it turns out that the trauma that occurs to kids in America is almost entirely confined to the family. So what the kids suffer from is childhood emotional abuse, loss of your caregiver, because we have 2.3 million people in jail in America. It's not so good for your kids when you go to jail. Having an impaired caregiver, witness to domestic violence, childhood sexual abuse, neglect by caregivers, childhood physical abuse. So it's all in the family, but because this is a congressionally mandated program, we are a gigantic amount of money is allocated to the impact of Osama bin Laden on the mental health of America's kids. And it turns out Osama bin Laden really is not hurting America's kids. So it's all in the family. And when we look at that, we look at, so what do these kids suffer from? And they suffer from affect dysregulation, and attention and concentration issues, negative self-image, impulse control issues, aggression, risk-taking. Then we put data together of 20,000 kids, and we make all these correlations. And what we really find is that all these diagnoses that we have right now in the DSM don't make any sense whatsoever. And actually, my favorite word for our diagnosis is bullshit. Like oppositional defiant disorder means this kid's a pain in the ass. That has about as much scientific validity as calling somebody a pain in the ass, PIA. Or conduct disorder means that this kid pisses me off. This diagnosis just had no validity whatsoever. And so we encourage the DSM to make a new diagnosis called developmental trauma disorder. We have an enormous amount of data that we propose to them, and this is a response for the DSM-5 that says the consensus that there's just too little evidence at this point to include developmental trauma disorder in DSM-5. The notion that early childhood adverse experiences lead to substantial developmental disruptions is more clinical intuition than research-based fact. The prospective studies by my friends Carl and Iris Ruth, Alan Shroof of the Minnesota Longitudinal Study, Frank Bottom apparently were not worth paying attention to because there's a vast database on the prospective effect of childhood trauma and neglect, and so it was completely ignored by the powers that be, just like incest was back when I was making my textbook. And now we have a choice. We can call people PTSD, disruptive mood regulation disorder, reactive attachment disorder, dissociative identity disorder, also self-injury, intermittent disposal, social engagement disorder, opposition defiant conduct disorder, borderline personality disorder. So you have your pick. None of these disorders are rooted in any way in any neurobiological or psychological. So that gets us into neurofeedback. And so about 9 years ago by now, I'm at a meeting, and this picture from Richard Clark and Sandy McFarlane has been on my mind now for about 5 years, and it continues to haunt me. And I'm at a meeting, and I meet Siebert, and most of you know Siebert, and to know Siebert is to love Siebert. So I cannot help but have lunch with her, and then the seduction starts, you know. And then she says, I know it's really hard to do neurofeedback, but let me show you this picture. I always say it's your picture. I don't think it's your picture, but it doesn't matter. So we do neurofeedback with we have this 8-year-old kid. Now, I have a children's clinic. We have actually a very large children's clinic. In Boston, I see a lot of children's pictures, and I say to Stephen, boy, that picture really sucks. That kid must be really messed up if that's the best he can do, drawing his family. And Stephen says, 20 sessions later, the kid looks like that. And I go, that's pretty good. And another 20 session, it looks like that. And I go like, hey, there is nothing I've ever seen that can change a kid's family drawings to that. And that becomes my opening into this miserable world of neurofeedback. It is tough. And so we learn about neurofeedback. And of course, as all of you know in this room, it's a whole other discipline. It's a whole other thing to learn. And I don't know any of you guys except for my friends over there, but to get into it is very hard. And do it all by yourself out there in Cairns. It's a lonely job. You really need a lot of support, and it's a tough, complex stuff. And as luck would have it, I have a clinic, and I also have a clinic with people where sometimes they like me, and when they say something is useful, they get organized about it. And at this point, 2 things happen, and they're both interesting. The first thing that happens is that I go over to Siebert's, and she shows me some of her patients who she has treated. And in fact, I hope to end up my little talk today with a little movie tape. We added a movie clip that I made of a patient of Siemens. The other thing is that we start training. And so a number of people, including John Seaburn, Derek Hirschberg, come over and we take a weekend off to train ourselves in neurofeedback. And the real clincher for me is that I have a colleague, his name is Richard, he is our director of training. And Richard is a very thoughtful guy, very tight, very correct, very careful. And we don't know him very well, but he's always reliable and stuff. And on day 2 of our neurofeedback training, he stops the group and says, "Hey guys, I need to share something. Something happened that I noticed yesterday for the first time, but I wasn't suspicious of it, but I could trust it, but it's still here. I'd like to share it with you." And he says, "You know, I'm always scared. Deep down, I am living on fear. And I'm able to compensate for it, and so I'm a little obsessive compulsive to make sure that everything is correct, and I'm always very careful, but I don't like being with people because it's scary. I don't like to really have a confrontation with people because it upsets me, and I have this low-level grade of fear. You know, it's gone. I feel okay." And it has major consequences because he shares an office with me. And now, I'm sort of a sloppy person, he starts telling me, "Hey Bessel, I'm using that office too. Why the hell is it so sloppy again?" So he starts having the guts to confront me without being overwhelmed by it. And we start having conversations that are not led by fear, but by interest and self-interest and each other's interest. And we become friends, and really good friends. And then it gets really bad because 2 years after we started our neurofeedback program, he walked into my office and said, "Bessel, I feel so good because of neurofeedback. And you know, I always want to be an artist. And so I came to tell you that I'm leaving the clinic and I'm going to be an artist." I said, "How can you do that to me? Like, you're my closest colleague and we're finally friends." He said, "I'm going to be an artist." So Richard leaves the clinic and has become a spectacular artist. So there's a side effect of good treatment is that sometimes it leads to divorce. That's a good story. You probably have all seen this picture.
Who used to hit
Have you all
me
seen
and
this?
punch me and kick me and bonk me.
That's true. That's an Australian picture. Now I'm going to become a neurofeedback researcher because I want Seaburn to love me. And it's impossible to get money for it. I go to I have a big track record. I have 150 peer-reviewed scientific articles. My book is the best-selling book in medicine, like you'd expect. I get no funding. Try well over and over again. And so we start a crowd-raising effort, crowdfunding. And so this is what we get back from people who do neurofeedback. There are a lot of pioneers in the field of neurofeedback. They do their beneficial work without double-blind studies, with great effectivity. You don't need the latter. Neurofeedback isn't like usual science. It's different because it affects both hemispheres. Also the right one, which doesn't obey usual scientific laws. It's very important to understand these facts. Thanks for your education. Why does one have to conclude that insurance should pay for neurofeedback? You really need to explain that why it's important that people can actually pay for the neurofeedback. Why has it become the sine qua non of neurofeedback? It's so hypocritical, thank you. The same people who bemoan the insurance industry line up to pray at the altar. Be careful with what you wish. Neuroscience teaches self-efficacy. It should be seen as a learning tool, not a medical device. Double-blind studies are an invention of the diabolical pharmaceutical industry and not how medicine has been practiced for over the past several millennia. Double-blind studies prove nothing. We all know how neurofeedback works. Do we actually need more studies to validate it for us? If someone here wants to get practical advice for training protocols regarding specific pathologies quickly and easily, go through the doc section here. You may find some nuggets without big research from the ideas of pioneers years ago. We know how it works already. Why is neurofeedback in such terrible shape? Because of that. Then I start writing for grants and collect data, and this is what I get from my scientific peer reviewers. Although the investigations say that certain approaches have been used to alter neural signals by using operant conditioning procedure, they do not present a compelling case that any of these neural changes could lead to changes in complex behaviors. Indeed, we have never shown that. A close examination of the references cited in this application indicates that these studies are often small, pilot studies, uncontrolled trials. By and large, this research has not been published in journals with rigorous peer review process. As a result, the empirical basis for the proposed study is questionable. They're correct. This came from NIH. There's nothing innovative about this technology. It's been around for 30 years. That is true, it has been around for 30 years. Whatever results that are published in non-peer-reviewed journals, these studies are generally underpowered, poorly controlled, and lack blind ratings. That is true. That's why I'm really unhappy about having become a member of this club. So now then we do collect data, and we collect some really terrific data, as you'll see, and we start peddling it for publication. And I sent it to all kinds of journals where, when I had a drug study, everybody said, hey, come in, a great study. But this is what I get response to neurofeedback. A recent review in this journal critically examined the field of neurofeedback, concluded that most of the findings are largely due to non-specific or placebo effect. This appears to be also the case for this paper, which used a weight loss control group with only 1 month follow-up and no crossover design. The findings that have been reported are likely to be spurious and non-specific. These methodological problems and designs prevents publication in a highly competitive journal such as ours. Who do you think you are? So the time between the completion of my study and the publication has been the longest one it's ever been. It took me 4 years to get it published. It's now getting finally published in PLOS ONE in the January 2017 issues. I didn't find a lot of warm reception for it. So what shall I show you? Let me just show you the study. So we get a team together, and we first do a pilot study to see what the best placement is. And we do a study comparing P4, T4 with T3, T4, and we use eager, and we enroll about 40 subjects, and we find that it doesn't make that bit of difference which location you have. I continue to have great questions about the whole issue of location of neurofeedback feedback, and I'm still looking for people who can actually clarify this for me, because it's very hard. I'm actually going to come back to that on the basis of my current study. And then we go with T3, T4, because that's a study we did. We assign about 44 people for 24 sessions to neurofeedback. For people who have had many negative therapy experiences, and a very remarkable thing happens. This is a very burned out, treatment failed group of people, many of whom happen to live quite a distance from Boston. I always like to talk about our climate out here when I come to talk in Sydney. I don't think you guys have a great deal of problem with black ice, do you? But we in New England do. You don't have a great deal of problem with blizzards and whiteouts, and that your car gets spilled off the road by a snowstorm. We do. And so when you do a study in New England, people oftentimes are prevented from coming to your study because of the beastly weather conditions that prevail in our area of the world. We didn't lose a single subject. We'd say to people who lived 150 miles away, we'd ask them, how are you doing in the study? He said, it's not doing me any good. I say, okay, so I'll see you in 2 days. 2 days later, a blizzard, they show up. So there was something about it, a dramatic difference about the difference between people's capacity to report what's going on with them and what their bodies propel them to do, which is interesting to me because we have done a lot of studies of different other modalities, and that was not our experience elsewhere. And then we measure all kinds of different things. And here again, politics is interesting because the prevailing paradigm is PTSD. But as you well know, neurofeedback is not a PTSD treatment. In fact, when I created the brain together, he didn't know a damn thing about PTSD. He just knew something about how to connect up neurons with each other. But in order to get something funded and published, you have to put in that little courses of a diagnosis, which is sort of purely accidental. And in some ways, what we found sort of really supports that. But in order to get it published, it needs to be a PTSD study. But we also snuck in one of my favorite research instruments is a scale invented by John Briere called the Inventory of Altered Self-Capacities. We also did extensive neuropsychological testing, and some of our most interesting results were in neuropsychological testing, and I very much, one of the reasons I'm happy to be here is because I'd love to talk with more people about the issue of correlating EEG changes with neuropsychological changes, and what we were able to do that. And we did very well. Let me just show you what we got. Huge changes in affect dysregulation, huge issue of identity impairment, huge different abandonment concerns, susceptibility to influence, interpersonal conflict scales, tension reduction things. But the biggest changes we found in executive functioning. And so while we're training the right temporal lobe, which has nothing to do with executive function directly, how it shows up is the mental capacities at the end make the difference between being a functioning person and a non-functioning person. And so being able to plan and make decisions, error correction, troubleshooting, mental flexibility, figuring out novel and unfamiliar situations, dealing with danger, resisting temptation, and self-regulation. So we have these very powerful, very highly significant results in our adult population of all these particular measures. I think that's a very big deal. I don't think that has been shown that way, that you can change executive functioning, and that of course would be an incentive to use neurofeedback machines in school systems and in universities. It has been difficult, for example. I negotiated at length, quite hopefully, with, probably some of you know, that Boston has the largest concentration of universities of any city in the world. And of course, we have all these veterans who've come back from doing a wonderful job in Afghanistan and Iraq to keep us free from those people. And they come back. They have a 98% dropout rate from their college courses. Why do they have a 98% dropout rate? Because they have PTSD. And what do we know about PTSD is your filtering system doesn't work, your PIS 300 doesn't work, your AD 200 doesn't work, so you don't have a brain that's really able to take in new information. So I went to talk to these guys and said, you really should do neurofeedback with these returning veterans in order to dramatically decrease the dropout rate, so these guys will actually become competent and productive people. I thought we had the money at some point, and that didn't work. I don't know why. It's a very hard issue. So these are the promises. So let me just finish up here. Most recently, we just finished a child study, a study of kids who, by and large, have been adopted by well-meaning parents. I heard you guys just voted down a gay marriage law in Australia, so that's one point in which Massachusetts is ahead of you guys. We have had gay marriage for at least 10 years, and it happens to be that the town in which our clinic is happens to have a high concentration of gay couples, and as a result, we see a large number of gay couples who have adopted kids from China and Eastern Europe, and who adopt these kids, and they think, oh, we're such wonderful people, we'll just love them, and before too long, by loving them, they'll become just as wonderful as we are. And they haven't read the papers about the damage that early childhood trauma does to people, and that's actually where they do come to us, because these children do not drink the milk of human kindness, they do not respond to limits, they do not get rewarded by people smiling at them and praising them because of all these state-dependent deficits in their brain development. To my mind again, neurofeedback is the only method that I know that would promise anything to possibly rewire these severely brain damaged kids where things have gone wrong. And so it's been a very interesting experience, and I'm not going to show you all our hard data. It's still very much in the pilot. We will publish this, but first of all, the first thing that we saw is that these kids have unspeakably damaged quantitative EEGs. They have theta all over their frontal lobes. They have beta in the occipital cortex. They have delta in their frontal lobes. Some of the stuff that Mirjana also sees in your clinic. It's interesting that quantitative EEGs, of course, are disreputable ways of measuring things. So when you show these data to neurologists, they immediately dismiss the power of the quantitative EEGs because these things do not show nearly as well as an fMRI. So we have a little job ahead of ourselves to actually make quantitative EEGs valuable. I'm very curious what your opinion is about that. And so what happens here is that we train these kids. And we train them for 24 sessions. And as we analyze the data, they do by and large pretty well in the first 12 sessions. And then they plateau. And I don't know why they plateau. And my psychological friends, I'm also a psychological friend myself actually, would have the psychological explanation that the brain needs to adjust itself to a new level of arousal. But I would like to know what that new level of arousal is actually that they're now adjusting to. And when you do eager, you don't know that because you don't have quantitative EEGs every step of the way. And so what we see is that kids get better, and then they plateau, and then when we stop the treatment after 24 sessions, most of them pretty much go back to baseline a month later. So clearly, these kids need much more than our P3, P4, P4, T4 that we're doing for them, but I don't know what. Of course, the way that Simon deals with that is she moves electrodes around the brain and sees what works. But for a scientific journal, that's not acceptable. So we can no longer live with fixed protocols, and we really need to live with QEEG protocols if we want to establish a scientific discipline of people really believing that the stuff is important. We need to have objective criteria about where to put these electrodes. And so we finished our study, and we have good enough material to get it into some minor thing, but we are really struggling with how to track these kids over time, to track them from week to week, what is actually changing. We can know what changes from week to week psychologically, but we cannot track from week to week what happens neurologically. And so we got very interested in whether the Z-score or S-Loretta might actually be able to do it. So we got a Brainmaster, so we got the Evoke, we got all these machines. But as I talk to people about what might be the best way of doing it, I am completely lost. And I hear nothing but contradictory pieces of information. And I think like somebody as smart as Mirjana has come back to do eager, because it's the easiest thing to give. But if you want to have a scientific backup of what we're doing and really track how these kids change, we've got to do a more precise neurological measure. And I don't know what to do there. And so I flew all the way from Sydney for you guys to tell me what to do next. Because we're lost. And so that's sort of what I think I'm going to talk about right now. So yes, I'm very proud that I got the first study on neurofeedback for PTSD in since Peniston and Kolk, I think. A very good journal. But I think the questions it raises for me are larger than the answers that we have been getting. And I think when I get reviews back from NIH and said that is all technology and you have to really live up to scientific standards, I have to say, I get it, we have to. And so I wonder if any of you can help me to respond to NIH and give me the data that I can use for a next grant application.